Hello everybody, my name is Mike Geig, and in this video we are going to look at access and properties in C Sharp. What we're going to use here is we are going to use the person class that we designed and developed in our previous video. And so everything here is exactly as it was in the previous video. The only difference is in our main program here, I took everything out, just remove everything. Um, Now, before we really kind of hop into things, I want to start by saying that I kind of jumped the gun a little bit in my previous video. I didn't want to talk so much about security and access modifiers in the previous video, and I started to ramble near the end there. But so we'll probably cover that in a more concise form right now. So, um, okay, so in C Sharp, there are a few different access modifiers, and an access modifier is something that changes the security level of either a method or a member, so a variable or a function. And our access modifiers are things like public. Now, with a public variable, the variable is in scope anytime you have an object or of that class. So, for instance, since this is public first name, if I go into programs and I say person, my person equals new person, and I type my person, I have full access to all of this stuff, namely the first name and favorite color and output person. Those are the things that I added um, because they're all public. I can simply do first name equals Mike. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's completely legal. It is a public variable. All right. Now, like I hinted on in my previous video, that's generally not a very good idea. The whole idea behind encapsulation is we sort of squirrel data away in its own little secure vault, right? Um, that way, people can't change it incorrectly. People can't break your code. People can't crash computer systems and blame you and stuff. You, as the person designing the class, will want to kind of extract that stuff away and keep it safe by making it private, and then just having very specific, what do I want to say? It's very specific functions in place to modify that data. Because right now it says my person dot first name. Well, I could say one. All right. Well, one's not really a first name, and or I could just say that empty strings. There is no first name, and that's also something we want to avoid. That's not really something that should come up, and that's something we want to prevent from happening inside of our system. But we'll talk about that. Okay, so another access modifier is protected. Okay, um, we're not going to talk too much about protected. Protected basically means this variable, in this instance, this variable is only accessible by the person class internally, like on in this particular document, inside this bracket and this bracket, right? It's only accessible here, and classes that inherit from this one. And so we're not talking about inheritance yet. When we do, I'll probably come back to protected. But so we don't generally use protected all that much. I generally don't. I generally just use private and public. Right? Very rarely will I use protected if a situation arises in which it's most ideal solution. Um, and so that leaves us with private. Now, a good rule of thumb on design, okay, is that members, so variables should be private, functions or methods should be public. That's just a rule of thumb. All right, that's if you're not sure what to do, that's a pretty darn good philosophy to follow. All right, and following that philosophy would make these private. Now, private variables are not accessible outside of the class. All right, so here in my program, I can't say my person dot first name. You see, it's not even in the list. First name equals Mike. All right, I'm going to get an error, and it's going to say is inaccessible due to its protection level. I am not allowed to change it. Okay, I didn't even see it was there. I just happened to know it was there. All right, and that's what we want. It prevents the user from modifying the file, or I'm sorry, not the file, the variable in some way that we don't want. Okay, so now the question is, well, if this is good design, right, where our methods are public and our members are private, how is this class useful, right? Because we can't modify our variables at all. And the answer is we have to have methods in place specifically to allow us to work on these. Now, in other classes, I'm sorry, in other programming languages like C++ or Java, we have something that we call accessors and mutators, or get and set methods, okay? And so we can simply type these out. I can say public string get first name. All right, and I can just say return first name. Okay, and public void set first name, which will read in a string name, and it will make first name equal to name. Okay, so you can see here I have a get and set method now. So in my program, if I wanted to set my name equal to person, I do, or sorry, to Mike, I do my person dot set first name Mike. I'm sorry, I typed get first name, set first name Mike. There we go. Awesome. All right, and that will allow us to set our first name and put a value into this variable. Okay, and then if we wanted to output that, we could do console.writeLine, and then we do my person dot get first name. And if I run it, we'll see Mike gets output because I put the value into the class here, and then I take the value out of the class here. Okay. And that's a traditional get and set method. All right. And I could do the same thing for favorite color. Now, that, like I said, is a traditional method of doing it. C# gives us something much, much, much more powerful to do basically what we're trying to do here. And those are called properties. All right. So while this you'll see get and sets in a bunch of different languages, and you might even see them in C# when a property is not appropriate. We generally use something called a property, which makes things much more fluid. Now I'm going to leave these in here so we can compare and contrast. Okay. So I'm going to leave those there. Eventually we'll delete them because we won't need them. But to do a property, now a property is basically a get and a set wrapped up into one variable name. And then depending on how you use the variable name, it either gets or sets. It just knows automatically. All right. My good rule of thumb, and this is just something I follow, some people do it differently, is I start my variables with a lowercase letter, like that, lowercase f for first name, and I start my properties with the exact same word, but the first letter is uppercase. So to do a property for first name, I'm going to do public, because I want it accessible, string, because it is a string property. First name is a string. All right. First name. You see I did it with a capital F. All right. And inside here I'm going to type get. And get's going to say return first name and set, which is going to set first name equal to value. Value is a keyword. Value is a keyword for whatever value they're trying to set this as. All right. That's it. That's the property. All right, takes up just a little bit more space, but you can see here it's a fairly similar thing. We just have our gets and our sets. We don't have get first name, set first name. So instead of having to remember what the name of our get method is and what the name of our get set method is, and to pass something into our set method, we simply need to know first name. Now let's look how it's used. Okay, so I'm going to come back over here to program, and I'm going to kind of bunch those up there. And so that's one way of doing it. And so now instead that's my set and get methods right here. I'm going to do the same thing with the property. So I'm going to do my person dot first name. All right, that's it. And here I'll show you this too. I'm going to hit dot. Now see the different symbol next to first name? That tells us it's a property. Okay, so first name is going to equal, we'll just say John now. John. All right. It's pretty simplistic. No parentheses, no functions or anything. It's just John, you know. So we're treating it like a variable, and that's what's really cool about it. So I'm just doing my person dot first name equals John, treating it like a variable, but C# knows that we're using the set method. All right. And then I'm going to do console.WriteLine, and I'm going to say my person dot first name again. Again, no parentheses or anything. We don't need to treat it like a function. We're treating it like a variable. And C# is smart enough to know in this instance, we're not using the equal sign, that it is going to be used as a get method, where it's going to return the value back. All right, and I'll run it, and we'll see Mike and John. So they both function the same way, only with our properties, we can treat everything like variables. We don't need to worry about the names of functions. We don't have to worry about the name, the set method, and the get method because they have two different names and everything. It's a lot less cumbersome to use it with just use properties. So let's go ahead and delete these here, and I think we can safely get rid of these here. Now I'm going to go ahead and create my properties for my favorite color just to keep everything fair. I'm going to do public string favorite color, and I'm going to do get return first name, and set, oh, I did first name, didn't I? Favorite color, and set favorite color equals value. Awesome. Okay. So now our properties are written. We can, we can see that it works. We can do my person dot favorite color capital equals brown. We can do anything like that. Awesome. Great. Okay. So we've kind of talked about what properties are now. We kind of see what properties are, but the question still is, what really is the purpose? I mean, as I look at this here, right, this is no different from just making these public. The user can still put anything they want in here, right? The user can still give full access to it. I mean, it's not, realistically, it's not any different, okay? There's no difference at this point between just making these public or doing all this extra work and making these private, all right? The real difference comes in something we call data validation, which we're not doing here yet, but I'm about to show you, all right? So right now, we've actually just created a bunch of more work for ourselves and have no benefit, all right? That's where we're at right now. I mean, this is all fancy free and everything, but there's still no data security here. People can still do my first name equals nothing, and then when I output it, I output nothing. They could still do that, or some number or whatever. There's no real data security yet. So let's go ahead and add some. All right, let's create a simple rule. Okay, here's my simple rule. I don't want a blank first name. I also don't want the name Carl. Sorry if your name's Carl. I just picked that one randomly. So, because I wanted two rules. So no Carls and no empty first names. I could say no numbers, but then I have to check for numbers, and I don't want to get into that code right now. Safe to say, I just want to say no empty names, no Carls. Okay. So inside my set method, I'm actually going to space this out a bit, and I'm going to say if value equals nothing or value equals Carl. All right, we'll come back to this here in a second. Else, so if the name isn't empty and the name isn't Carl, I feel pretty good about letting this go. Okay, so else first name is going to equal value, and let me space that out again. I don't like the spacing on this. There we go. That looks better to me. Okay, so if the value equals nothing, or if it equals Carl, I'm gonna get rid of these brackets now. We're gonna say console dot WriteLine. All right, and we are going to say incorrect first name set to Mike. And if I'm going to do 2 lines here, I'm going to need brackets, and then I'm going to say first name equals Mike. Okay. Great. And now we can say, you know, if they pass in an empty string or if they pass in Carl, we're going to throw an error, right? Otherwise, we're going to give them the name they want. Well, I want to say something about this, but before I do, let's just watch this happen. So I'm going to do my person.first name is going to equal blank. Okay, and I'll run it, and I see incorrect first name set to Mike, and Mike is output. All right. Similarly, if I say Carl, incorrect first name set to Mike, and then Mike. Okay. So great, our data validation is working. It's preventing us from breaking it. Now, this is the reason. This here, data validation, is the reason we make variables private and then our methods public. Okay. Data is the most important part of any program. We want to keep that stored away secretly and have special things in place to modify it. All right. So just keep that in mind. Now, before we continue, I want to point out a couple things here. First and foremost is your data validation. Things like this, they go in your properties. All right. You can have data validation in other places. Don't get me wrong, but there's no purpose to a set method unless the set method does some form of data validation. If your set method doesn't do data validation, right, then you might as well have just made the variable public, right? There's no reason for its existence, right? So if you ever sit there thinking, where should I put this data validation? Should I put it in a constructor? Should I put it in some random function or whatever? Should I put it when the user? It goes here. It goes in your set methods. You can have it in other places too, but the set method is where you want it to be. All right. So that's first and foremost, just to point that out. Second is that this is really bad design. All right. It's bad design, but we're working with what we have until we get to things like exceptions and stuff. All right. First and foremost, this class is not responsible for writing to the user. All right. This class is a person. Okay, it's a person class. It is not responsible for writing to the user. In the future, what we're going to have is we're going to have exceptions where this class can write a nice, neat exception, just send it off, and it can be handled by the responsible party. All right, but for now, this is kind of what we have to work with because we don't have a choice. All right. Another thing is setting first name equal to Mike it's a terrible idea. Okay, not that I have anything wrong with the name Mike. I'm quite fond of it, but we're just picking some arbitrary value and we're putting it in here. And the problem is that what happens if the user goes back later and says, oh, the name's Mike, right? Awesome, right? Well, they're never really sure, is it Mike because that's the person's name? Or is it Mike because it was never set, right? Or it was set improperly and it was just randomly set to Mike, all right? And again, you can't really do like default, or or something like that, because what happens, I mean, you have to consider in this day and age, what if someone's name is default, or error or something? People have weird names. All right. So again, you're never really sure, not to mention that this is in English, but there's a lot of different languages out there. And maybe default or error or invalid or something means something in a different language, and that is someone's name or something. Who knows, right? These are things we can't know. So it's generally poor design to set the first name to some arbitrary value here. It'd be much better to throw an error, not set it to anything, and give the user another shot. All right. But that's too convoluted for what we're trying to do here. So until we get to exceptions, we're going to do it this way. All right. But be aware that until we get to exceptions, this is a poor way of doing it. All right. We're just doing it because we don't have a choice yet. All right. So always keep in the back of your mind that this is not good design. All right. And we will fix it later when we have the tools to make it better. Okay, so let's add one last bit of data validation. What we're going to do is we're going to validate our set method for the favorite color. All right, and we can do if we'll say value equals nothing. We're only looking for an empty value here. If value equals nothing, then I'm going to do console.writeLine. invalid color, else, and I'm not going to set a default value in this one. Oops, I forgot there we go, that's what I forgot. Okay, and so there, I mean, that's just, I'm going real light on the validation here. And so now we have our data validation for both their first name and their favorite color in their very own properties, and everything works out pretty fantastically. Now, before I finish this video, I do want to point out, you don't have to have a get method, right? That's just fine. I think we don't have to change. Yep. So you don't have to have a get method, and if you don't have a get method, then I can do my person favorite color equals blue, and then if I did something like console.writeLine, oops, man, I can't type right now. Console.writeLine, my person dot favorite color. All right, this won't work. Let me run it. I get an error. It says cannot be used in this context because it lacks the get accessor. Right? There's no get method. Right? Where would that be useful? Let's think about something like private data, like credit card number. All right? I want to be able to set it when someone signs up for a new credit card, but I don't want to just be able to access someone's credit card number, right? I don't want to just be able to get it, all right? So we don't have a get method. That's a very abstracted way of thinking about it. I'm sure there's much more layers of security involved with credit cards, but that's kind of a way to approach it. In the same way, let me just undo that. I don't have to have a set method, all right? I can just have a get. That's for something like an ID number. A person gets an ID number, right? Maybe there's a private method that assigns an ID number, and you can never reset that ID number. That's their ID number, right? So we only have gets, we don't have sets, and this still works just fine. We still don't want favorite color in this instance to be public, because we don't want them to be able to set it at all. So we keep it private, and we just don't give a set method so the user can't set it. All right. So we have some flexibility there. We have some power there. All right. So that's going to conclude my video on this part 3.2 access and properties, where we talked about all the access modifiers and properties, gets and sets and things like that. All right. So in the next video, we will be looking at constructors, and then we will be looking at libraries.